We feel the ground shifting, a tectonic unease. Old hatreds, dressed in new uniforms and armed with sophisticated algorithms, are on the march. They call it populism, nationalism, a return to greatness. But it smells the same, it feels the same. It is the perennial architecture of fascism, built on the bedrock of the other, cemented with the mortar of fear. And in the face of this, what are our weapons? More noise? Higher walls? A more ferocious tribe? We feel the pull to react, to mirror the rage, to meet force with force. The temptation is to become the monster, to fight the monster. But the feedback loop of fury only feeds the machine. It's an exhausting, soul-eroding war of attrition. There has to be another way, a different kind of warrior. I find my thoughts drifting back, not to a chapel or a sanctuary, but to the dusty roads of Galilee. I see a man, not haloed in gold leaf, but squinting in the sun, his hands calloused from wood and his feet caked with the earth of his people. Strip away the 2 millennia of dogma, the empires built in his name, the doctrines that became cudgels. See him for what he was, a spiritual revolutionary, a warrior whose battlefield was the human heart. His power was not in commanding legions, but in seeing the person kneeling in the dirt. Fascism requires a caricature, a dehumanized enemy to justify its cruelty. The tax collector, the prostitute, the leper, the foreign occupier, these were the disposable archetypes of his time, the vectors of societal scorn. His rebellion was not to lead a violent insurrection against them, but to commit the most radical act of all, to sit with them, to eat with them, to touch them. He wielded empathy as a weapon, and it was devastatingly effective. It did not just challenge the Roman authority or the religious purists, it dismantled the very psychological scaffolding of hatred. By insisting on the shared humanity of the outcast, he revealed the system of othering as a hollow, fearful lie. The modern activist sees this and learns. The fight is not won by creating a better counter-argument, but by stubbornly, relentlessly, seeing the human being inside the uniform, behind the slogan, beneath the flag, and the suffering. We are taught to avoid it, to numb it, to triumph over it. His path was different. He walked directly into it. The cross was not a divine transaction, but a political act. It was the ultimate demonstration of nonviolent resistance. He allowed the brutal machinery of the state and the mob to do its worst, and in doing so, he held up a mirror to its grotesque nature. By refusing to meet violence with violence, he forced the system to reveal its own moral bankruptcy. His suffering wasn't a failure. It was a lens clarifying the injustice for all to see. For the spiritual warrior today, this means understanding that enduring the state's backlash, the public scorn, the pain of the struggle, is not a sign of defeat. It is the very act of exposing the rot in the system. It is the price of bearing witness. This revolution, then, is not first and foremost external. It is an uprising of conscience that begins within. He understood that fascist ideology cannot take root in a soul that is whole. It feasts on insecurity, on resentment, on the unexamined fear of scarcity. The inner work, therefore, becomes the primary activism. To dismantle my own prejudice, to confront my own capacity for judgment, to cultivate a quiet center in the storm of external rage, this is the training ground. To change the world, one must first change the landscape of the self. Imagine, then, an uprising guided by this playbook. It would not be a single march, but a distributed network of quiet, defiant acts. Instead of shouting down the hateful, we would build communities so inclusive and resilient that the narrative of division seems brittle and absurd. We would create systems of mutual aid, community gardens, tool-sharing libraries, childcare cooperatives that demonstrate a world of abundance and solidarity, making the state's promises of security through exclusion obsolete. This is the modern equivalent of feeding the 5,000, not a miracle of magic, but a miracle of collective sharing that bypasses the established channels of power. This uprising would practice radical nonviolence not as a passive plea, but as a strategic refusal to play the oppressor's game. It would use its body, its presence, and its unwavering compassion to de-escalate, to disrupt, and to expose. It would wield discernment like a surgeon's scalpel, cutting through the thick tissue of propaganda and ideology to expose the simple truths and lies beneath. It would reject the simple answer, the single scapegoat, and embrace the complex, messy, and beautiful reality of our interconnectedness. And most critically, This movement would act from a place of profound, proactive love, not reactive anger. Anger is a fire that consumes its fuel and then itself. It is a necessary spark, perhaps, but it cannot sustain a revolution of the spirit. Love, in this context, is not a sentimental emotion. It is a fierce, courageous, and disciplined orientation toward justice and the flourishing of all. It is the force that builds rather than demolishes, that heals rather than wounds. It is sustainable because it is generative. He from Galilee offers no easy answers, no 10-point plan for political victory. He offers something far more demanding and far more powerful, a set of principles to be embodied. The leadership is not a person to be followed, but a path to be walked. The revolution is not a seizure of power, but a transformation of the human heart, spreading from one to another like a whispered truth, until it becomes a chorus that drowns out the noise of hatred and fear, not with volume, but with the undeniable harmony of our shared soul.